When people talk about wasted potential in hip-hop, names like Fetty Wap, Roddy Ricch, or Chance the Rapper usually come up. Guys who came in strong with massive hits but quickly fell off. But one name that doesn't get brought up enough is The Game. His raw talent is undeniable. Honestly, he's one of the coldest rappers at BI ever. Definitely top 50. But instead of staying focused on his craft, The Game kept getting caught up in beef after beef with the biggest names in the industry.
JC! I said JC! You old
Too much 50 Cent, not enough West Coast rap. 50 Cent.
When have you ever heard an Eminem song in the club? I don't hear Eminem in the streets. I'm just a better rapper.
All that drama? It cost him big. He burned bridges and left his mark on the game in the worst way. He just couldn't stay consistent or prioritize what really mattered, his music. And now it's showing. Recently, hip-hop had its biggest West Coast moment in a decade. Dr. Dre, Kendrick Lamar, Schoolboy Q, YG, Mustard, basically every West Coast legend was there. But The Game? Left out completely. That's wild when you think about everything he's done for the West. How bad did he mess up for them to leave him out like that? It's like the whole industry turned its back on him. And in this video, we're diving into exactly how it all went left for The Game. To understand why The Game was left out of that huge West Coast performance, we gotta rewind and look at how it all started, and the chaos that followed him. The Game came up in Compton, deep in gang life from early on. In 2001, he got shot, and that moment changed everything. While recovering, he told his brother to bring him classic rap albums, and that's when he locked in on becoming a rapper. By 2002, he dropped his first mixtape, You Know What It Is, Vol. 1. It made noise, so much that even Diddy tried to sign him. But things took a major turn when Dr. Dre got a hold of that tape. He signed Game to Aftermath in 2003, seeing his raw potential. That same year, Interscope bosses Jimmy Iovine and Dr. Dre teamed him up with 50 Cent and G-Unit to build hype. G-Unit was on fire at the time, and Game was expected to ride that wave. He even popped up in 50 Cent's In Da Club video, dancing in the background with a girl, his first major cameo. By 2005, The Game dropped two massive hits with 50 Cent, Hate It or Love It, and How We Do, just before his debut album The Documentary hit the streets. That album blew up. Later, 50 Cent claimed he wrote nearly 30% of it, but we'll get into that later. One thing's clear. Standing next to 50 gave Game a serious boost. Grateful for the spotlight, Game sided with 50 and jumped into all his beefs, whether they had anything to do with him or not. And that pattern? It followed him for most of his career. From the jump, Game was stirring up drama. Not long after his rise, he fell out with Lil Eazy-E, son of the legendary Eazy-E. They started off cool, even recording music together, but things turned sour when Game planned to title his debut album Nakuk with an Attitude, a name tied directly to Eazy-E's iconic group. NWA Lil Eazy-E wasn't having it. He accused Game of disrespecting his father's legacy. Game fired back, claiming Lil Eazy was chasing clout and living off his dad's name. Then came the diss track 120 Bars, where Game went in, saying Lil Eazy didn't even write his own rhymes. And just like that, another beef was born. And the trend kept going. The Game had a habit of dropping endless bars in diss tracks. But even in 120 Bars, he said he didn't want beef with Lil Eazy-E out of respect for Eazy-E himself. By October 2006, Game claimed they'd squashed it. But way back in 2005, he had already picked a new fight, with none other than Suge Knight. At the time, Suge was still seen as Dr. Dre's enemy. Game said Suge put too many lives at risk, jumping into yet another beef that didn't directly involve him, just to defend his mentor. The drama kicked off when rapper Yuckmouth, who was already beefing with Game, claimed Suge slapped him. Game clapped back online, saying if Suge had ever laid a hand on him, Suge would be 6 feet under. Then at Kanye's VMA afterparty in 2005, Suge Knight got shot, and rumors started swirling that Game was behind it. Meanwhile, 50 Cent was in a full-blown war with Ja Rule, Irv Gotti, and Murder Inc. So of course, Game threw himself into that mix too. On West Side Story, he rapped, "I don't rock button-up shirts or drive Maybachs," which many thought was a shot at Jay-Z. Game later clarified it wasn't aimed at Jay, but at J. Rule instead. Still, the pattern was clear. If there was smoke, Game was diving right in. Game once rapped, "If I die, fuck it. I did a song with Mary J. Blige, got a hook from Faith, no verse from Jay," referring to West Side Story. He later explained he wasn't dissing Jay-Z with the Maybach line, telling Ed Lover and Moni Love it was just a mix-up. Game even said he had major respect for Jay and would never come at a legend like that. But when it came to Ja Rule, Game didn't hold back, dropping brutal freestyles, especially one with DJ Woo Kid that fans still talk about. At the same time, Game was collaborating with 50 Cent, signed to G-Unit, and jumping into all his beefs. But things quickly turned sour. Even before the documentary dropped, rumors of a feud between Game and 50 started bubbling. 50 eventually kicked Game out of G-Unit, claiming Game didn't back him in his beef with Fat Joe and Jadakiss. He also said Game was downplaying his role in the success of the documentary, claiming he wrote 6 tracks on the album. Game denied it. But the tension exploded when 50 was at a radio station dissing Game, and Game's crew showed up outside. That same day, shots were fired between their camps. Things got way too real, and eventually, the beef got so heated that both rappers were forced to hold a press conference just to squash it, for the moment, at least. Fans were confused when Game and 50 Cent held that press conference. It felt staged, and they were right. G-Unit kept dissing Game anyway, calling him fake and saying he couldn't score a hit without them. Game clapped back at Summer Jam, launching a full-on boycott against G-Unit called "Giu Note." He followed that up with his savage diss track 300 Bars and Runnin', once again going off for hundreds of bars. Then came You Know What It Is, Vol. 3, packed with more shots at G-Unit, and even at Rockefeller Records, Jay-Z's label. Game made it clear he wanted smoke with Jay-Z and G-Unit. In return, 50 fired back with his Piggy Bank video, mocking Game as a Mr. Potato Head doll. It got petty fast, and both sides kept going. Game stayed relentless, dropping Ghost Unit and Stop Snitchin', Stop Lyin', flips on 50's Get Rich or Die Tryin'. 50 responded with Not Rich, Still Lyin', trolling Game right back. This war wouldn't die down. Every G-Unit member took shots, and Game fired right back with 240 bars, tearing into each one like it was personal. The beef had fully taken over his career. Game's beef with Jay-Z actually started from a misunderstanding. When Game rapped, "I don't do button-up shirts or drive Maybachs," Jay thought it was a diss. He fired off a freestyle on Funk Flex's show using the word "game" repeatedly. Fans instantly took it as a shot. Game sure did. He clapped back with the track My B Keith, dissing G-Unit in verse 1, Jay-Z in verse 2, and Suge Knight in verse 3. At this point, it felt like Game was beefing with half the rap game. He kept taking jabs at Jay-Z, even getting crowds to chant "fuck Jay-Z" at his shows. At a 2009 concert, he even told fans, "If you like Jay-Z, get out." Wild. Jay finally addressed it that same year in a Tim Westwood interview. But instead of a full response, he brushed it off, calling Game a groupie and saying he wasn't worth mentioning. That said a lot about how the industry saw Game. Too messy, too loud, and not worth the energy. Jay-Z made it clear. This wasn't a Kanye or Nas-level feud. Game just wasn't in that league. And by 2006, after clashing with just about everyone, Game was officially dropped from G-Unit and cut off from Dr. Dre too. After getting dropped from Dre's Aftermath, Game signed with Geffen, still under the Interscope umbrella. He kept telling fans that Dre would produce tracks on his next album, Doctor's Advocate, but Dre didn't produce a single song. Later, Game admitted it. There'd be no Dre involvement after all. Still, the album was a hit. He scored big with tracks like Wouldn't Get Far featuring Kanye and One Blood. But by 2008, Game was claiming LAX would be his final album so he could focus on family. That turned out to be another fake retirement. He was already back in the studio working on the R.E.D. album. Around that same time, he went off at a concert dissing Jay-Z again, right before Jay said he'd never even say Game's name. Even without a response, Game kept provoking rappers. He had a habit of jumping into beefs that had nothing to do with him, starting drama just to keep his name buzzing. In 2013, Game randomly jumped into Tyga's beef with Lil Durk, even though it had nothing to do with him. It all started when Durk dropped a verse on Lil Herb's Chirac remix saying, "Tyga only got one name, but that man ain't got one stripe," basically calling Tyga soft and not street. Durk later claimed the beef began after a lyric he had about Black China, Tyga's girl at the time, on a track with French Montana and Chris Brown. Chris played it for Tyga, who asked Durk to change the line. Durk agreed, but only if Tyga would hop on a song with him. Tyga never followed through, and that's when things got messy. Tyga fired back with his own remix of Chirac, dropping the track Chirac to LA, and he brought Game along for the ride. While Tyga kept things light, Game went off. Game rapped, "I don't mess with new dudes, they like to sue," and later added, "Tyga hit me like Durk dissin'." Durk who? Never heard of these dudes. He wasn't just defending Tyga, he went full attack mode on people he barely had beef with. Game went in hard on Chirac to LA, rapping lines like, "Don't make me put on that burgundy and let the AK, I'm serving these dudes." He hyped Tyga up with bars like, "T-Raw, it's time to murder these fools," and dissed Durk with, "Lil Durk under a little dirt, nobody knows you." He even mocked Durk's hit at the time, "Diss Ain't What You Want," saying, "I thought that was Future's song you done." He really tried to downplay Durk like he wasn't even a factor, but not everyone was feeling Game's energy. LA rapper Compton Menace called him out saying, "This dude takes on everybody's beef except his own." Durk responded, posting, "Tyga needed all that help because he finished," adding that Game carried the whole diss track. Game didn't back down. About a month later, he dropped Bigger Than Me, taking more shots at Durk and the entire 2014 XXL freshman list, which Durk was on. But finally, during the 2014 BET Awards, Game and Durk linked up and squashed it. Game even tweeted, "My big homie G Weed put Lil Durk on the phone. Beef is dead." Both sides showed respect. By 2015, Game was nearly 35, but clearly old habits don't fade. That year, Lil Wayne started beefing with Young Thug over some serious drama. Wayne was fighting with Cash Money and Birdman, while Birdman was now mentoring Thug, just like he once did with Wayne. Thug tried naming his debut album Carter 6, a play on Wayne's legendary Carter series. But since Wayne was still trying to drop Carter 5 and Cash Money was holding it back, things got messy. Wayne threatened to sue, so Thug renamed his album Barter 6. The two started throwing shots at each other and the beef took off. Out of nowhere, Game jumped in. At a concert in New Orleans, he threatened Thug, saying, "Anybody messing with Tune got a problem with me. I'll mess Young Thug up." Thug clapped back on Instagram, mocking Game for switching gangs and saying, "You were a male stripper once. I don't want them germs." Real shady. Game later appeared on The Breakfast Club, saying he went to Atlanta right after things popped off, implying it almost turned serious. Once again, Game inserted himself into beef that had nothing to do with him. Game made it clear he wasn't cool with anyone dissing Lil Wayne. During a live performance of Hate It or Love It, he took another jab at Young Thug, switching the lyrics to, "Since I was 10 years old, I was a young blood. These days, y'all got Young Thug. Your favorite rappers wear skirts? Mine used to put people in a hearse." That shot was loud and clear. But just as fast as that beef started, it faded. Why? Because Game got distracted. Again. Around the same time, the legendary Drake versus Meek Mill battle was heating up. Meek accused Drake of using ghostwriters, and Drake fired back with Back to Back, a track that crushed Meek's momentum. The back and forth eventually cooled off by summer 2016, but a full year later, Game jumped in out of nowhere and dissed Meek Mill himself. And just like his past moves, he once again chose the underdog, someone already catching losses. It was the same pattern, from Ja Rule to Suge Knight to Lil Durk and Young Thug. Now Meek. Game had a habit of going after easy targets when they were already down, which made him look more thirsty for beef than anything else. Even Game's beef with Jay-Z mostly happened while Jay was retired and past his peak. Besides 50 Cent, Game rarely went at top-tier rappers in their prime. And even that feud wasn't one he fully started. Before diving into the Meek Mill drama, it's worth noting how many other random beefs Game sparked. Most of them quick and clout chasey. He chased down 40 Glock and posted the fight on World Star, beefed with Waka Flocka on IG, talked about boxing Gucci Mane, and even argued with Chris Brown over his ex, Kardashians. These all followed the same pattern: start drama, then backpedal. But his beef with Meek Mill dragged out longer than usual. In summer 2016, during a club appearance at Story nightclub, Game got on stage and called Meek a snitch, saying he wanted to beat him up. According to Game, it all started when Sean Kingston got robbed and jumped at a club. Kingston reached out to both Game and Meek for help getting his chains back. Game said he tried to help, but claimed Meek told Kingston that Game set him up. That's when things really kicked off, and this time, it wasn't just a quick diss, it turned into a full-blown war. Game claimed that after Sean Kingston got robbed, Kingston called the cops, and they questioned Meek Mill. According to Game, Meek told police he set Kingston up. Meek and Kingston denied it all, saying Game made it up just to hype his new album. Still, the cops got involved, and the beef between Game and Meek Mill exploded. Game dropped a diss track called 92 Bars, and Meek fired back on Instagram, calling it a promo stunt. You want to fight? Then it's diss tracks and pre-order links? The jig is up! They went back and forth online, and Meek dropped a remix of Young M.A.'s Ooh, featuring Beanie Siegel. Game clapped back with his own remix, going in hard for 6 minutes, mostly roasting Meek. He threw shots about Nicki Minaj, saying she had her thumb in Meek's behind, claimed Meek had to leave LA for safety, and mocked him for jumping Quentin Miller while ducking battles with Drake and Game. Beanie Siegel later backed away from the drama, saying he wasn't even supposed to be involved. I just walked into the studio and helped with some lyrics. But by then, the damage was already done. The beef was full-blown. Beanie Siegel later cleared the air, saying, "It's not beef between me and Game. We've always had a good relationship." That was between Game and Meek. Game, meanwhile, kept the pressure on, dropping another freestyle and claiming Meek's crew jumped Beanie. Eventually, Meek seemed to realize it wasn't worth the energy. The back and forth died down, and years later, they quietly squashed the beef. But outside of disses, Game had another habit: name-dropping everyone. Rappers, celebs, women. If someone was trending, he'd mention them. While he was loyal to his people, always ready to defend a friend, he also never missed a chance to stir things up. Back in 2012, he was praising Kanye on the track Heaven's Arms, rapping, "Kanye's with Kim, I'm happy for that man, disrespect her, I'll slap you for that man." But by 2016, that changed real quick. In his song Sauce, Game bragged, "I slept with 3 Kardashians, hold that off." When Wendy Williams asked if Kim was one of them, Game dodged the question, saying, "Kanye's a good friend and they've got beautiful kids. I don't want to disrespect their family." Game has a long history of switching up, and in 2019, he dropped a wild bar on Instagram. "I held Kim Kardashian by her throat, made her swallow my kids until she choked. I should apologize because Kanye is my folks." Super disrespectful, especially after once calling Kanye a friend. But by 2022, things flipped again. After Kanye divorced Kim and started beefing with her new boyfriend Pete Davidson, he linked up with Game for their track Easy. In the video, a cartoon Kanye buries Pete, and it's rumored Game even wrote Kanye's verse, which aired out his issues with Kim. That same year, Dr. Dre headlined the Super Bowl halftime show in LA, bringing out all his proteges, Eminem, Kendrick, Snoop, Anderson .Paak, but not Game. Game was heated. On Drink Champs, he vented, saying Kanye did more for his career in 2 weeks than Dre ever did. He basically dismissed Dre's entire role, signing him, teaming him with 50 Cent, and producing the documentary, as irrelevant. It was a bold claim, and classic Game, burning bridges, then playing victim. Game caught heat after saying Kanye did more for his career in 2 weeks than Dr. Dre ever did. A bold claim dropped right after Dre's Super Bowl performance, which Game wasn't part of. It looked like pure bitterness, aimed at downplaying Dre's massive role in his come-up. But in a 2024 Vlad TV interview, Game tried to clear it up, He said Kanye went out of his way for him during that time, and that loyalty meant a lot. "Ye always had my back," he said, while admitting Dre didn't always, but for good reason. Dre had to protect his brand. Game claimed he was just speaking his truth, adding, "I gotta protect the interest of Game, just like Dre protects Dre." He also insisted there was no real tension. He still talks to Dre sometimes and doesn't think Dre took it personally. Oh, and he added that he was drunk on Drink Champs when he made those wild comments. According to him, it was just the liquor talking. Another classic example of Game saying too much, then walking it back later. Before walking back his Dr. Dre comments in 2024, Game was still throwing shots while hyping up his 2023 album Drillmatic. Not only did he take more digs at Dre, but he also fired off at Eminem, Dre's biggest protege. We'll get to that in a sec. But here's the thing. Game was now 42 or 43 years old and again claiming this would be his final album. Sound familiar? He said the same in 2008 with LAX, and again in 2019 with Born to Rap. That's 3 retirement claims and counting. Oh, and let's not forget, he lost a $7 million lawsuit to a woman from his reality show. She was awarded the profits from Born to Rap in the settlement. Tough loss. Whether the retirements were real or just publicity stunts, Game clearly couldn't walk away. But with every last album announcement, his sales dropped lower and lower. He's now moving about 20,000 copies in week 1, way down from the 300K, 500K range he was pulling back in his 2005-2008 prime. Sure, rappers age and their fan bases shrink, no surprise there. But with Game's talent, it's wild to call his career anything but a huge missed opportunity. That's why this all started with the word waste. When Dre and 50 Cent cut ties, Game still proved he could stand on his own, dropping hits, solid albums, and even classics. Skill-wise, he's got what it takes to hang with any era. While his peers, 50 Cent, Eminem, Jay-Z, Lil Wayne, still tour and drop music with huge success, it's because they built legacies that earned the industry's respect. Game? He's been around just as long and can arguably out-rap some of them today. He's sharper lyrically and still putting out new music regularly. But the problem? Focus. Instead of growth, Game's stuck on the same patterns. Constant name drops, endless beefs, and no evolution in his content. That's what's kept him from reaching the level his talent deserves. Because of his non-stop drama and lack of growth, Game hasn't earned the same legacy or respect as his peers, even though his skills are still sharp. Fast forward to 2023, and he's showing the same immaturity he had back in the G-Unit days. On Drink Champs, while dissing Dr. Dre, he also said he used to think Eminem was better. But now he knows he's the better rapper. Confidence is one thing, but the way he said it came off arrogant, especially considering Dre and M helped launch his entire career. Instead of showing respect, Game talked down on the very people who gave him a shot, despite not coming close to their achievements. Rather than pay homage, he leaned into ego. That attitude carried into his Drillmatic album. Yep, the third retirement project, where he dropped a 9-minute diss track called The Black Slim Shady. In it, he mimicked M's flows, used shady-style personas, and even threw in an Uber ride skit to mock his storytelling style. It wasn't just a diss. It was a full-on impersonation, dripping in shade and disrespect. In The Black Slim Shady, Game takes things even further. The track opens with a fake Uber ride, driven by the fictional brother of Stan, Eminem's iconic obsessed fan. At first, it sounds like a twisted tribute to M's legacy, but by the third verse, the tone flips. Game starts unloading disses, saying 50 Cent should be writing M's verses. Ironically, 50 once claimed he wrote for Game, mocking M's past pill addiction and calling him a fake version of Royce da 5'9". He even claimed Big Sean, not M, is Detroit's best rapper. And somehow, he blamed Eminem for not helping him after he left Aftermath. It came off more like a desperate reach than a real diss, especially after Game was left out of Dre's Super Bowl show, and things got even messier when he allegedly left comments on Eminem's daughter's Instagram, pushing the disrespect even further. Eminem fired back, not by name, but through a verse on Esmeal's song Realist, rapping, "The only retort is, I'm not played enough in clubs. Only reason they still play your stuff is because you still perform them. No name drop, but everyone knew who he meant. Eminem's verse made one thing clear. If he and Game were ever on the same track, M would wash him. The harshest line? M said Game only hears his own songs in clubs because that's where he performs, while M's out doing stadium tours, living off a legacy built over decades. Basically, M painted the picture. While he's performing for thousands, Game is stuck doing the same club shows from 20 years ago, desperately trying to stay relevant by name-dropping bigger artists. And the only reason Game keeps taking shots? Jealousy and the need to revive a fading career. But in typical Game fashion, he later backtracked. After all that heat, he claimed there was never real beef with M. He said he only dissed him because no one else does, and insisted it wasn't personal. Game even said that when he first heard his name mentioned by Eminem, it gave him chills, like the first time he heard Biggie's Juicy. He admitted he always respected M, and their fallout likely came from Game's issues with 50 Cent, which put M in a tough spot. Game later admitted his shots at Eminem were emotional, partly fueled by being left out of the Super Bowl and feeling some type of way about Dre. Since Dre doesn't rap, he figured the next best target was M. As for 50 Cent, Game brushed him off, saying he's doing TV now and not active in the rap lane. Game said he just wanted to make hip-hop interesting again. These rappers today are boring, he claimed. To him, poking at Eminem wasn't personal, just keeping things competitive. He even compared it to when he dissed Jay-Z back in the day. It's just hip-hop, he said. I'm not fighting Eminem, but lyrically, outside of M, Kendrick, or Cole, I don't think anyone can touch me. Now in 2020 past, through his Vlad TV interviews, Game is walking back nearly every beef, claiming they were all just lyrical and never meant to be real-life drama. And honestly, he has a point. His beefs made him one of the most talked-about battle rappers ever. The diss tracks? Legendary. But still, it makes you wonder, if he put that same energy into creating another documentary-level project, could he be standing next to M, J, or 50 right now? None of the big names Game dissed, Eminem, Jay-Z, or even 50, ever really gave him much attention. They didn't feed into the drama, and unlike Game, they didn't make a habit of starting random beefs for no real reason. While the competition gave fans some wild moments and solid tracks, it left Game's legacy in a strange place. He didn't age into the game like his peers did. His newer albums are hit or miss, and despite his talent, people just don't take him as seriously anymore. Now, after saying all his beefs were just hip-hop and there was never bad blood, you'd think at 44, with kids and nothing left to prove, he'd finally chill out and enjoy the career he built. But nope. As soon as Drake started beefing the whole industry, Game jumped in randomly by dissing Rick Ross, his former collaborator, just to defend Drake. The diss barely made a ripple, and Ross didn't even respond. Kendrick Lamar recently dropped the #1 hit Not Like Us, and followed it up with a massive show celebrating the West Coast's win. He brought out everyone, new names like Westside Boogie, Blexa, Roddy Ricch, his TDE crew, Yeet G, DJ Mustard, Tyler, and even legends like Dr. Dre. But one name was missing: The Game. After the show, Game went on a 17-minute Instagram rant trying to explain why he wasn't invited. He claimed he helped Kendrick early in his career, insisted he had no part in the Drake beef, and reminded everyone that Drake is his friend. He also tried to assert his power in Cali, saying anyone in the state knows who he is. But honestly, it was just noise. A long-winded attempt to justify why he keeps getting left out. First, it was the Super Bowl. Now, it's Kendrick's big night. Despite Game's undeniable talent, legendary debut, the documentary, and several strong releases, his constant drama, name-dropping, and burned bridges have made the industry quietly move on. Without him, Game burned too many bridges, and it's why he's never been celebrated like his West Coast peers. Look at where they've taken their careers. 50 Cent built a TV empire. Dr. Dre sold beats for $1 billion. Snoop became a global icon through movies, brands, and music. Even Eminem, who stayed focused purely on rap, spent years sharpening his craft, dropping albums, avoiding drama, and performing to sold-out stadiums worldwide. Not every M album was a hit, but he kept the focus on the music, not the mess. Game, with his talent, could have done the same, maybe even better. But instead of stacking up classic projects, he spent the last 15 years teasing retirements and jumping into over 10 different beefs. None of them personal, just competitive, or attention-seeking, depending on how you look at it. If Game had just focused on the right things, his legacy could have been something else entirely. But hey, knowing him, retirement probably isn't happening anytime soon. In fact, during his rant about Kendrick, he said he's working on the documentary 3, so who knows, maybe another classic's on the way. What do you think? Are you satisfied with where Game's career ended up after all these years? Or do you feel like all that raw talent got lost in the beefs and distractions? Would you rather see your favorite rappers keep it lyrical or keep chasing drama? Either way, if you made it this far, you're a real one. Make sure to like, subscribe, share, and drop a comment below. Let me know what rapper or story you want me to break down next. And until the next time I clickbait you into another deep dive, peace.